Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I have with me Tracy Otsuka of ADHD for Smart Ass Women. She is the host of the ADHD for Smart Ass Women podcast, and she joins me for a conversation about how ADHD shows up in women in really unique ways. And we dig into why it's often overlooked or misunderstood, because the symptoms don't always match up with what you see in men. And of course, overwhelmingly, this has been studied mostly in men and boys historically. So in this episode, we're going to break down the top 3 signs of ADHD, especially for women, how hormonal changes play a role, and why embracing your strengths is way more effective than trying to, quote, fix yourself. All sorts of really wonderful things about ADHD in women and how this can be really a superpower if we can lean into it in important ways. So again, as always, if you like this episode, if you like my podcast, give me a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen that does a rating system. I would really, really appreciate it. And as always, also feel free to share this episode with your nearest and dearest. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Tracy Otsuka. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on and talking about ADHD for Smart Ass Women.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking.
So, all right, let's start off with a conversation about ADHD in women and why this might look a little bit different for us and how it might manifest differently and why that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I am certain that there are women listening to your podcast thinking, I'm checking out. This is not me. And what I would like to recommend is just hang on just a little bit longer, because it might be. ADHD shows up in women very differently, often than in men. So first of all, what is ADHD? ADHD is a neurobiological condition. Basically, it includes hyperactivity. You can't sit still. Or it might be hyperactivity of the brain, right? Where you can't shut the brain down, overthinking, all of that. Impulsivity. So we tend to act before we think at times. Distractibility, meaning we may struggle with focus. And, you meet one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. All of our symptoms can look a little bit different, which is exactly what makes it hard to diagnose. But ultimately, what's going on is it's all about dopamine. The neurotransmitter dopamine, either that we're not making enough of it or we process it differently. They don't know for certain exactly what causes it. There are 3 telltale signs of ADHD, though, that you typically don't hear about. So the first one is unexplained underachievement. So you're talking to a human and you can tell how bright they are, but they just haven't achieved what you would think someone that bright would have achieved.
Basically, the story of all of my report cards.
Yeah, exactly. If she would just have tried harder, or the one I always got was, I actually did well in school, but I would always get marked down for conduct because I was talking all the time.
Right.
So talking, for women especially, men do this too, is a form of hyperactivity, right? You don't always have to be bouncing up and down in your seat and climbing the walls and being annoying in that way, but we can talk a lot. Consistently inconsistent is the second telltale sign. So there are some things that you do so well. We tend to do the very hard things really well, especially if we're interested, But the everyday, day-to-day paying bills, making sure our kids' paperwork is signed off on, getting dinner on the table. Yeah, those things not so good. It can also look like it looked for my son getting A's and F's in the same subject in the same week. You're never quite sure, when is that really brilliant brain going to show up? Number 3, typical productivity tips and tricks that work for everyone else do not work for us. So things like just do it. Well, if we could just do it, we would have already just done it. Or
and we would have done it perfectly.
Yes. And if we're interested, we will.
Right.
Or like eat that frog, which is the one where you're supposed to do the hardest thing first thing in the morning. Like, no. And, that's because we need to ratchet up our dopamine, right? Or time blocking. Now, there are some people with ADHD that can do it, though.
Nope, not it.
And the reason we can't time block is we're not going to know how we're going to feel when we blocked that thing 2 weeks ago and said, oh, this 3-hour block is going to be for, I don't know, writing that series of emails, right? When that day comes, we're just not sure we're going to feel like doing it. So we tend to struggle with time blocking. All of this said, ADHD is not a disorder. It is a brain difference. And what I want your audience to understand is that 43% of all people with ADHD are in excellent mental health. I didn't say okay mental health. I didn't say good mental health. I said excellent mental health. And this was from a huge study in 2022 out of Canada. The deal, though, is nobody's talking about that. All we talk about is everything we can't do, right? What the struggles and the weaknesses of ADHD are, when in fact, there are so many strengths. And of course, there are people like Simone Biles. I just saw her win at least one other gold.
I mean, they just swept. She just swept.
Yes. Simone Biles, Greta Gerwig, she produced that Barbie movie, which I think was the second highest grossing film in history. Lisa Ling, who's the investigative reporter, they will tell you, they all have ADHD. They will tell you they are successful because of their ADHD, not despite it. Now, ADHD looks different in women. Which translates into why 75% of women with ADHD don't even know they have it. They are undiagnosed, and that is at least 75%. And the reason is we tend to have 2 times the rate of inattention. So the hyperactivity is in the brain, and it looks like overthinking. It looks like, rejection sensitive dysphoria, where there's just this heightened sensitivity to any kind of criticism. Inattentive ADHD can look a lot like the absent-minded professor, where you are positively brilliant in your area of expertise, but everything else, you're just kind of a disaster. For the girl in the back of the classroom, and boys can have inattentive ADHD too, it will look like you're in the back of the classroom and you're in your own fantasy world. You don't even realize that you're in school, let alone in what class. All of a sudden, the teacher calls on you and you're like, wait, what? Huh? And so you may look like you're just out of it. You're not very smart, but really they're creating this brilliant fantasy world in their own brain and often aren't paying attention in school, but are going home and teaching themselves whatever it is that they need to learn. So you can have ADHD, and especially for girls and women, and be really good in school. Boys too. The thing though is if you are inattentive, what you're doing is you're internalizing your symptoms. You're beating yourself up in your head. Well, this friend can do this and, this classmate can do that. Why can't I do it? I know I'm smart. This just doesn't make any sense.
That was me.
Versus boys will externalize their symptoms often, right? They're annoying. They're climbing the walls. They're talking back. They're getting in fights. So they're the ones that get the services, they get the diagnoses, and the girls don't. But what the girls get instead with all of that internalizing of symptoms is anxiety and depression, a lot of the personality disorder labels, instead of, hey, you know what? It's ADHD. The other difference is girls tend to be diagnosed later in life. They tend to be diagnosed around puberty. And the reason this is we now know that estrogen modulates dopamine.
Oh, that's interesting.
What are the periods in our life where estrogen is bouncing around? It's puberty, it's pregnancy, it's postpartum, it's perimenopause, and it's menopause. And this is the deal. symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are pretty much the same as
100%.
symptoms of ADHD. So you've already got the ADHD, maybe undiagnosed, right? Then you throw the perimenopause, menopause on top of that.
I was a mess.
It's what I call late onset ADHD. So if you go back to your childhood, you were always chatty. You were always all over the place. Your room was probably always a mess. Your desk, they opened up the desk and that was a mess. But because you're smart and you're probably often hyperactive, meaning you're always in action, you've learned, you've trained yourself that you feel better when you're constantly doing, you by and large look like you're pretty damn successful. So no one would ever expect that you have ADHD. And it isn't until the wheels fall off the bus in perimenopause or menopause, because your dopamine levels are dropping down even further, that all of a sudden you're like, I think I have dementia. I think I have Alzheimer's. Yeah,
literally. That's what, And it wasn't until I got on hormones and that I was like, oh my God, my brain's back.
Yeah. And you're so lucky that that worked for you, because it didn't work for me.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, I mean that it was life-changing, but there was a period of a good, probably almost 10 years where I was, an absolute mess, absolute mess. And by the way, not in excellent mental health. So I'm curious about this. I'm curious about this thing about being in excellent mental health while also you've got women who are struggling from anxiety and depression because they're not diagnosed. Yeah. And also we're dealing with, let's say in menopause and perimenopause, all of this other stuff. Like, how do those things square? Okay. Or are those the other 58%?
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
The women that struggle the most with ADHD have trauma.
Thank you.
And it's not just, you can get trauma from ADHD. If you're constantly being told, are you stupid? You're not trying hard enough. All your classmates can do all these things, from your parents and then from your teachers and from your coaches and then your partner, right?
Right.
You can understand how that would cause trauma. And unfortunately, the trauma symptoms are the same as the ADHD symptoms. So you're stacking all of this on top of each other. It's no wonder by the time you reach your mid-40s, everything goes to hell.
Yes. Yes. That was 100% my experience. And I was constantly saying, okay, is this trauma or is this ADHD? Is this trauma caused by the ADHD, or are these ADHD symptoms that are caused by other trauma?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's how do you, it's like spaghetti, right?
Right.
How do you pull it apart? The thing that I do want to say, because there's probably someone in your audience and maybe, I don't know, their child has been diagnosed with ADHD. Maybe, they've thought, well, maybe I have ADHD, or their partner kind of poo-poos it like a lot of partners can do, right? That, there's no such thing as ADHD, like it's a friggin' religion. I don't believe in it. Let me tell you why this is so important for girls. Another study out of Canada, 24% of girls diagnosed with ADHD will attempt suicide.
Wow.
This is 8 times the rate of women without ADHD and 3 times the rate of men diagnosed with ADHD. And I believe this is in large part because of gender roles, social stereotypes, and sexism, right? Girls, because of, they were born with a vagina and breasts, are naturally supposed to be better at all of the executive functions, the planning, the scheduling, the social schedule, the getting the kids to school on time, the cooking, the shopping, like all of that, which is crap. Yeah. Just because you're born a woman does not mean that you're naturally good at these things.
Right.
So it's just this pile on.
Yes, 100%. I remember I just those like expectations, right? I just assumed because I was a woman that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and I was going to really enjoy like the cooking and the cleaning and the baking and the homemaking. And so like that, I was super psyched when that became available to me. Yeah. And I thought I was going to lose my ever-loving mind. I couldn't handle, I was so bored. And and I think there was no stimulation. Nope. And my brain needs that stimulation, needs a lot of stimulation.
And it's like Groundhog Day, right? It's the same thing every day. You're done with one day and it starts over again. Like that is the antithesis of positive emotion that our brains need to, survive and be happy and successful.
Right. So with these mental health issues, right? I mean, that's a really startling statistic. Yeah. And what do you see as being something that we can do to help our children? Like, I don't want to leave my audience being like, oh God, well, I guess I have a girl who was just diagnosed with ADHD and now she's going to, she's at higher risk for suicide. Yes, she is. And how do we mitigate that? How do we better support our girls so that is not their fate necessarily?
We listen to them. We lean into their strengths. So there are weaknesses of ADHD, whatever. Why are we constantly being told, let's shore up those weaknesses? No, they're my weaknesses. I hate them. Screw that. Focus on their strengths. So the first thing I would recommend is there is a great free survey that anybody can take. And if you have a child between, I think the kids survey is 8 to 17, they can take the kid one. If you have a child that is older, they can take the adult one. You can take it together. And what this survey, it's called the VIA Character Strength Survey. You can just Google it. I'll get you the link for it as well.
We'll put the link in the show notes. So would be great.
But the beauty of this survey is, so our character strengths, there's 24 of them. We all have them, but they are ranked differently. And the beauty of discovering what it is that you're good at is when you take the survey, you will discover, and it's not like your values can feel like they're aspirational, right? You discover, okay, this is what I value, but you're not there yet. Mm-hmm. Should I keep going?
No, yep, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. But you're not there yet. So you feel like, well, I'm not there yet. This is depressing. I'm not even living my values. Your character strengths, you are living right now. They are who you are. They are how you move in the world. So for example, my number one character strength is humor. Mm-hmm. I know that if I have to deal with anyone and I'm struggling, number one reason I'm struggling is because they have no sense of humor. Can't even be there. It is not my environment. Right. And so you can imagine as a teenager, if you've got a bunch of teachers that are humorless, it's no wonder you're struggling with them. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So I think the first thing that you could do for your daughter or son, take that VIA Character Strength Survey together. It will allow you to understand how they move in the world today. What is important for them today? And then they can understand what's important to you. And so when we understand each other better, right? And it's not, oh, they're a teenager, which I don't buy off on any of that. They're a teenager. They're just going to be selfish. They're just going to be brats. It's part of what they have to go through to become adults. BS. My kids didn't do any of that. But it's because I had the idea that we're not going to do this in our house. But what that also meant is I had to listen to them. And I had to take their concerns seriously. We are, it's not like you're the child and I'm the adult and you're going to do what I say. No, we discussed everything so that I would understand their point of view. And sometimes as a parent, you have to say, okay, well, I get what you're saying, but you need to trust me on this one. I've been on this earth longer. So this one, we're going to do this way. And they're going to be okay with that if you're not doing the authoritarian model in every other area of their life, right?
Right. Absolutely. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break and I want to keep going with that on the other side because I have questions. So just a moment. We'll be right back. Okay. So before the break, we were just talking about leaning into your child's strengths and not making that. And this is the rejection trauma and dysphoria that we get when you are so, and I know I experienced this with my son, by the time he was in second or third grade, he had spent already almost half of his life being told to stop fidgeting, stop moving, sit down, right? It was constant for him. And so the trauma of that is really real. And I tried really hard in my house to not punish these things. It was really important for us to establish what was a can't versus what was a won't.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, he would identify. He was able to say, I can't, Mom, I can't. And then we go, okay, okay. But now in the other home, right? Because my ex and I think this is an important aspect for my audience, is that we are often married to or divorcing or divorced from people who have a different perspective on these things that are often not based in research, but based on, I don't even know what it is, ego, right?
Yeah. And wanting things to be a certain way, right? This is my view of the world. I'm in this little box, and you are not allowed to do anything to destroy that box or even change the box a little bit.
Right, right. So how do we support our children when, I don't have control over what happens in the other house necessarily? I may not, we may not have a collaborative co-parenting relationship. How do you work with people, or how do you recommend people support their children in these different environments where one of them might feel really out of control and really not okay?
Yeah. So studies have shown that all you need is one adult who really believes in you, right? And sees your brilliance, sees sees your heart.
Yeah.
And if they have that, I mean, you can imagine if they have both parents, both parents are on them all the time and into this authoritative parenting, and this is what we do in this house, you can see how damaging and traumatic that could be for a child. But if they've got you and you're acknowledging what they're feeling, you're not gaslighting them, they understand that, okay, so the way I feel it's valid.
Yeah.
So you're validating them. They're going to be okay. Because, the thing is, you can't really do anything about the other house, right? But what you can do is set that child up so that they understand, okay, yes, I am not good at these things, but look at all these things I'm brilliant at. I mean, these kids are brilliant. And what I say, I've got a podcast, I don't know, 300 some, like yours, 300 some odd episodes. What I say all the time is, who really are the brilliant kids in school? Are they the kids who sit there, do what they're told, never ask why, are completely not curious? Or is it the kids who are always saying, well, wait, why do we have to do it that way? What if we did it this way? And I did some research and blah, 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 blah. And what, it's those kids. So they just need to hang on long enough to get through high school. It gets better if they're going to go on with their education. They're able to choose what it is that they're interested in. Because the one thing we all have in common, there's actually two things, but this one is we all have brains of interest. So when we are interested, we're top of the class. We are literally, we get to the master's, we get to the PhD, the graduate school, and we are the valedictorians. Because we're interested. And the problem with education is it goes wide instead of deep, right?
Yes.
We're supposed to know a little bit about everything. And when an ADHD brain is not interested, it's really hard to inspire them or motivate them. We don't get motivated like that.
Our sons they're very similar in that. And this is really challenging, right? This is one of the challenging pieces of parenting a child with ADHD, or like ours, with this relentless curiosity that will never take because I said so or the easy answer, right? They're always going to dig a little bit deeper and then want to know more and want to wonder why. And okay, but that doesn't make sense. Okay, but why? Fine. Right. I mean, there are days when you just want to scream because I fucking said so. While also wanting to nurture this incredible curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? This absolutely, my son, when he was 2, that everyone around us was like, you better be saving for law school, which of course was not what my son wanted to do, but I think he would also be brilliant. But he's a musician, so whatever, right? Because he's got this creativity and I will walk into his room and he is watching YouTube videos on quantum physics and it's like relativity to music.
Totally.
Right. And I'm like, I go in there to yell at him to turn off YouTube and it's like, what do you watch? Oh, okay. Carry on.
So I will tell you that what I think works best in those situations, because I have the exact same son, is always humor.
Yes.
Because, the other stuff, no, it's just, okay. So the other thing that we all have in common is I shouldn't use positively thrive. We absolutely thrive with positive emotion and positively wilt with negative emotion.
Yes.
So however you can bring positive emotion into his sphere, he's just going to do so much better. And if you can get him to realize, because what we need to do with these kids is we need to teach them how to start trusting themselves, because so many of them don't, because they're constantly being told that they're wrong. Right?
That's right. Always, always. And at 19, right? My son is now 19 and he's out exploring. He's not in college. That was not his path.
Yeah.
He's in school. He's taking classes. He's studying music, right? But he is in this wonky trying to figure out where he belongs in the world space. And I'm just trying to give him as much latitude and space for that as I can, because it's on the one hand really kind of scary and demoralizing, and things are not great all the time, but also like, oh my God, how exciting.
And I mean, okay, you could have the kid who just goes right in and boom, 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 boom. And then what happens, right? They are kind of in their 40s and all of a sudden they hate their career. They hate their life. They're positively miserable because they didn't listen to their curiosity. Or you could have your son who's been through all that. And hopefully the offshoot of it is he will discover something he just is passionate about.
And he has. I mean, he just, music has been his thing for so long, and it really is. Anyway, and some of the challenges of that is co-parenting with somebody who is more authoritarian, who over time has sort of backed off on it, but not entirely, right? My son is not really getting what he wants out of his school, but he made a commitment, and so he has to see it through, according to his father. And so I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on, again, like I create as much positivity as I can in his, and he has chosen to live with me full time now for, I think, pretty obvious reasons. But, I'm still co-parenting with someone who has a different point of view on it. Has come a long way, because he was also the guy who was like, well, I know better, and this is not a serious diagnosis, when everyone who looked at his diagnosis was like, whoa.
Okay. So the reason why, and men do this a lot, they don't want to believe in ADHD, is because frankly, it's been sold as, oh my gosh, you're not going to be successful. You're not smart. You're all over the place. You're not reliable, which is BS. So if you can show your ex the brilliance that the ADHD brain is capable of, I think that'll go a long way in him getting on board, because what you don't want is that, your son is working really hard in his area of interest, and then behind him is his dad like, wah, 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 right?
Yeah, right.
Because he doesn't approve.
Right.
And we hope that we build enough, fortitude and character and energy and drive and all of those things in him so it doesn't affect him, but it's still his dad.
Right.
So I really think
Absolutely.
if his father were educated on the strengths of ADHD, I think most entrepreneurs are, on the ADHD spectrum somewhere.
Yeah.
And did you say your ex probably kind of has signs of it?
100%. Oh, he totally does. I mean, he's been diagnosed. But I think it is. I think what you're saying is really important, because, and you talk about this in the introduction to your book, about how, when your son was first diagnosed, that his doctor said, basically lower his expectations of life.
Who would ever tell a child that? Or tell a parent to tell a child that? Yeah.
And
that was a psychologist.
Right. And I think, and an ADHD specialist. Like, God. And I think that is especially since boys and men are diagnosed at higher rates, certainly younger, that is the mindset, I think, of so many of them. And so when you're basically have a diagnosis for your child, I would imagine a lot of men who may have experienced this as children or growing up, to see that sort of fate being passed upon their child might also be really difficult, and they may be defending against it in very unskilled and,
Absolutely
not useful ways. But I can imagine that might be part of the impetus too, right? That I don't want that for my kid.
Well, and it's that puritanical work ethic. Well, and especially if you're a male, right? You're just going to power through it. No.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is anyone with a mental health condition, anxiety, depression, bipolar, ADHD, autism, these, and I level 1 autism, I will tell you, these are the brightest members of society, right?
That's right.
The reason why we're brighter because our brain is constantly moving. We are constantly thinking. We're curious. We want more.
Yes.
It's also why we struggle or can struggle.
Right. And I want to come back to what you were saying about entrepreneurship, because I think this is a really interesting topic, because I do think, right, we are outside the box thinkers. ADHD brains are we're outside the box thinkers. We often see things that others don't see, right? We kind of get to the root of a matter really from that place. There is so much creativity that is new and different and entrepreneurial.
It's the difference between focused thinking and divergent thinking. So a focused thinker, a neurotypical, someone, who has a neurotypical brain, which is, what most people have, right? They want to solve a problem. They already have an idea how it's going to work out, what they think is going to come of it. And so they are very linear in their thinking. So it's, they go to 1 and then they go to 2, which is behind 1, and then they go to 3.
Yeah.
And then they tend to discover whatever it is that they thought they were going to discover or learn.
Okay.
A divergent thinker, someone who's kind of all over the place in their thinking, they think a little bit here and then they go there and over here. Well, they don't think like that. They are much more open to whatever can happen. So when they formulate an idea, it tends to be a better, more creative idea because they're willing to consider things that a typical thinker won't have in their horizon.
Yes, I think that's, so true. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on the other side of the break. Okay, we're back. So I think this is really interesting, right? Because for many divorcing women who may have ADHD, may be listening to this going, I wonder, right? And when you're getting divorced and you're rethinking and starting your life, right? A lot of women want to start their own business. If they are neurodivergent and have this entrepreneurial brain, I'm wondering, what advice would you give to someone who was contemplating starting their own business, who was thinking of like, wow, you know what? Yes, that is the way I think. And here I am at the crossroads of my life, and I'm going to start something new. What advice do you have for women like this?
The best advice I have is to hire someone to help you as soon as possible.
Ooh.
So that you are focused in the area of your brilliance. You are in the creating mode. If you're going to get yourself bogged down in all the administrative stuff, you're not going to be able to get out of the front gate. So whoever you can hire, if it's a barter, if you can get your kids to help, you need to get help as early as possible, because that way you're actually using your brilliance you're using your strengths instead of trying to shore up your weaknesses.
I heard when I started my business, and I didn't have anyone because I couldn't afford anyone, but when I was starting my business, I remember thinking that what I needed was someone, because I had all these ideas that were like coming out of my brain like an assembly line, but they had nowhere to go. And what I needed was someone to take them from my brain and then move them down the assembly line, basically, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're talking about, right? That like have someone who can sort of corral the creative genius into something that actually works.
Yeah, we are fantastic starters. We are okay middlers, meaning kind of setting it all up initially, but we tend to be pretty terrible at the follow-up, right? So we need help because it's boring. We've done it
so
once.
boring. I've already figured this out. I had the idea. What the fuck do you want from me?
Yeah.
What do you mean I have to implement it? This is why the systems don't work for us, right?
Yeah.
I will spend all day time blocking and color coding my calendar, but then you want me to actually follow it?
Yeah.
No, I've done it. I did it. I set it up.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
I am amazing at creating systems. Terrible at actually using them.
Okay, but I'm sure there are systems, and maybe what it is that first of all, I'm sure that there are systems that you have actually put together that do work for you.
Totally. Yes.
So the key is to look, we think we don't have systems and strategies because our systems and strategies aren't like theirs.
Right.
We do have systems and strategies. So when you're trying to figure out, okay, I want to do this new thing, the first thing I always recommend is, okay, do you have a system and strategy that you developed that works for you, that you may be able to apply at least a part of it to this new challenge?
That's a great question. That's important. What other words of wisdom and and again, I feel like we're straddling a couple of different demographics, right? It's women who may have this, mothers who are parenting and going through divorce with kids with ADHD or some other form of neurodivergence. I love the idea that we're leaning into strengths, that we're finding what our strengths are. Any advice or any words of wisdom for women who are going through divorce? Like, divorce is an executive function nightmare. And so I'd love to hear your advice it is project planning, really, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of project planning involved in this.
The emotion.
Yeah.
Well, and that is one of the things that we can often struggle with. We've got this impulsivity. It leads to emotional dysregulation.
Yes.
And we know that if you're in your limbic system, you're all emotionally dysregulated, guess what? The prefrontal cortex, which handles all the executive functions, the planning, the scheduling, all of that, it totally goes offline.
Right.
So it makes sense because it is, especially when there's kids involved, it is probably the most emotional thing that you've been through.
Absolutely. It is.
I've had a lot of women in my community discover that they have ADHD and then ultimately end up in divorce because they were gaslighted for so long and didn't realize that that's what was going on. Because what happens to a lot of women with ADHD is they don't learn how to trust themselves. So they fall into learned helplessness and they end up with a partner who basically is doing all the stuff, telling them what to do. And then when they go do something that actually feels good for them, they're discounted, right?
Right.
And so the number one piece of advice I have, because it is life-changing, is if you think that ADHD is part of your puzzle, go get diagnosed. The whole point of that is to reduce the shame, for you to understand that I'm not dingy, I'm not stupid, I'm not all over the place. It's not that I'm not trying hard enough. It's not that I don't care. I don't have a character flaw. I don't have a moral failing. No, I have a different brain that works using a different operating system. And then really figuring out, what does that operating system look like for me? It is life-changing.
Interesting. And so I've never actually been formally diagnosed, right? So, I'm like, yeah, of course I have it, whatever. What does the diagnosis do? Like, separate from, okay, yeah, I clearly have it.
A couple things. So some people are just, I know I have ADHD. That is not important to me. I don't need it. A lot of us, though, number one, would like to try and see, does medication work for us? Unfortunately, it doesn't work for me. But there are a lot of other, when you get diagnosed, it should not just be about medication. That should not be enough. If you're lucky enough that it works for you, it can be life-changing. So I always feel like, well, it's probably worth a shot. However, if medication doesn't work for you, you know what, at least for me, is like the number one is exercise. Exercise is as effective for an ADHD brain, anxiety and depression as well, as a course of Adderall, which is a stimulant for ADHD, and a course of Prozac. So for mood.
I agree.
It's my
Yeah.
my go-to, my number one. And so what you'll find too is a lot of women that are runners, and the way they manage their ADHD is, they're out running miles a day. And so they don't struggle with the symptoms that they would struggle with, let's say, if they break their leg.
Yes. Yes. I will say that's very true for me. Very true for me. I'll be like at the end of a week or something, and I'll be like, what is wrong with me? Why is my depression just like overwhelming? Why can't I focus? And I'll be like, oh yeah, you skipped your fucking workouts this week.
Yeah.
Moron. Right. Yeah. Like that's it. Or you're sick and, you didn't get to, like, I'm recovering from COVID right now. So like, I haven't worked out all week. So it's like, and
yes.
I feel it. I feel it. It's so true.
But it's understanding that equation, right?
Yes.
For yourself. And so it starts with, oh, it really is ADHD. Because the other thing we do is we second guess ourselves. We'll have like one diagnosis after another because, especially if you're traditionally successful, you're thinking, oh, it can't possibly be ADHD. And understand ADHD is on a spectrum. So you can have very few symptoms or only the really great symptoms, of ADHD, or you can have a lot of symptoms and really, really struggle. Usually, again, when you're really, really struggling, it's related to anxiety because you can have the worst symptoms of ADHD and be this incredible creative artist, right? Who was always so well respected for their art that you have very few of the negative symptoms, the self-talk and the rumination and the rejection sensitive dysphoria. And all of this, we know through neuroplasticity, it is all changeable. Right. We can build new neural pathways in our brain that not only help our ADHD, but also anxiety and depression, which tends to be a cousin of ADHD. Mm-hmm. Because when you have this fast brain that's thinking all the time, well, what do you think anxiety is?
Right. Right. Exactly.
And if you don't know, and you're beating yourself up, well, yeah, obviously that can lead to depression.
We could talk about this all day. One of the things that you said something at the top of the hour that I want to sort of bring back because I think it's an important thing to know about medication, which is that ADHD is a difference in the dopamine receptors functioning, right? It's either not firing, they're not meeting, they're not landing, right?
They're not staying long enough.
Yeah. They're not, right? There is no way to test for what your issue is, which is why there's so many different medications on the market. And it's really challenging. I know. So my son, hypersensitive like I am to medications, right? Yep. So get all the side effects. We tried 13 different medications.
Yeah.
Because it was like, is it a firing issue? Is it a landing issue? Is it a sticking issue? We don't know.
I love the way you said that. Landing, firing, sticking. That's great.
Right. The different medications do different things, but it is all an experiment and a crapshoot, and we don't know. Yeah. The doctors don't know, right?
No, we're guinea pigs.
We are, right? And so for someone like my son who just got all the side effects from all the different medications and it was a disaster for him. And this was like, sort of formative years of his life. That also caused, I think, a lot of his issues in rejection dysphoria and all that stuff. And you said for you, it doesn't work, right? And so people often write in and ask me like, what did you do? What medication worked? And I think the important thing is we don't know. It's not something nobody can say for what's going to work for you.
At least not yet, and they have these tests you can take. They look at genes
we did that too. And you know what? My son got greenlit on all medications. And we were like, well, then why? He's having side effects from every one of these medications. So
we're just not there yet. Absolutely.
We're really not.
But the beauty of it, so I think your son's name is Emmett. Mm-hmm. I love that name. The beauty of Emmett's situation, though, is maybe he was meant to figure it out without medication, right?
Yeah.
And what he has discovered is that there are certain things that fire a lot of dopamine for him, one of which is music. Versus, let's say the medication did work and he could go to school and do really well in school and sit in that seat and get that degree. And then again, he turns 40 and he's like, oh my God, I'm still on this medication. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I didn't do with my life what I wanted to do. I haven't lived my purpose. So I'm the eternal optimist. And I always look for, what could have been the reason for that now he's leaning into his strengths more and more rather than doing that shoring up your weaknesses.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a gift. It really is. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on. Where can everyone find you, your book, your podcast, your website? There you have so much available and such a wealth of information. Where can everybody go and learn more?
The easiest way is ADHDforsmartwomen.com. Everything's there.
Yes. Amazing. Tracy, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for lending your wisdom to my audience.
Absolutely. Thank you for what you do. I have not been personally divorced, but I've had very good friends where I felt like I was their partner going through the divorce. And so what you do is so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.